to London, my hometown, for the last 30 years or so, despite all those nasty petitions. When I say I'm happy to be here, I really am. The reason is because I was in Fort McMurray last night speaking. So I caught the 12:20 a.m. flight out of Fort McMurray to Toronto, and by some miracle, Air Canada actually delivered me to London at 8 o'clock this morning. So when I say I'm happy to be here, I'm happy to be here. Fort McMurray is a fascinating community. I don't know how many of you have been there. They have problems that we don't have in Ontario. They are oozing money. It's quite remarkable. I never been to Fort McMurray before. They took me on a little tour, and they're showing me, frankly, a trailer park. And I'm saying to myself, why the hell are they showing me a trailer park? And then they said, well, just so you understand, these old trailers in here are going for $500,000 each. That's where people live. I was at the bar last night. Well, where else would you be in Fort McMurray? And the guy was telling me that he shares a little apartment with two friends. They pay $4,200 a month for rent. The average home price in Fort McMurray is now a little over $750,000. It's Vancouver-type prices. And their average annual household income is double the Canadian average. If you ever want a second life when you come back next time, beg to become the Tim Hortons franchisee in Fort McMurray. Trust me on this one. If you believe nothing else I tell you today, believe that one. The real reason I took an overnight flight, which I hate, is because after 4 terms on City Council, I realized where the real power in City Hall lies, and it's with you guys. So I'm thrilled by the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here. So how are those investments in that Greek hedge fund working out for you? We talk about what finance officers do. Remember, it wasn't that many years ago that in Orange County, the treasurer there made a bet on interest rates and lost. And they went bankrupt for $1 billion. 20 U.S. cities gone bankrupt in the last 2 years, including Stockton, California, where I think the bank just repossessed their city hall, which I would think would be embarrassing. The point is, what you do is really important. And I know you spent the last couple of days here focusing on a lot of very critical issues in what you do in your professional lives. Today, to kind of wrap up this conference, I want to think big with you. And I want you to look at larger issues. Because sometimes we get so focused at the local level on what we are doing in our day-to-day lives that we forget that there's a big world out there, and some of it's scary and some of it is coming at us, and sometimes we don't stop and step back for a moment and say, okay, where do we fit, and where's our universe going, and where's our town or city and municipality going? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, is because nothing gets done in the municipality without your involvement. Nothing. I understand that. Not sure all council members do, but you are so critical to how that municipality functions, the things you can do and can achieve. Because if you're going to make profound change in your community, you know there's going to be a financial element and component to it. And that's where your role comes in. And that role has become so much more important and so much more challenging. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But I want you to be able to think big this morning. Because coupled with the realization and understanding of what you do on a daily basis, we also need to understand better how critical municipalities are to our national economy. And in Canada, we have not done a very good job of that. We need to better understand our global competitiveness and these issues of prosperity that are facing countries around the world. And again, for Ontario municipalities, it is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. Taking back our cities. I'm going to focus on that because it's a call for change in Canada. It is a recognition that for most people and most businesses, most of the time, municipalities become the most important order of government. And that's not anti-province or anti-feds. It's simply a reality, and it's a clarion call that I am making for change in how we run our towns and our cities. And in Canada, we haven't been very focused on that. The hard truth is, the simple reality is, we have a national government without an urban agenda, national urban agenda. We're the only G8 nation not to have a national transportation plan. We don't have an energy strategy. These are big issues that affect you every day. And our national government is not focused on them. Why is this important? Well, very simply. The World Bank issued a report recently that said the three largest economies in the world are the United States and China and the 50 largest cities in the world. Isn't that a different way of looking at things? That's how important you are to Canada and in the global situation. So we need to change our traditional way of looking at communities. And a key reason is because we have begun the greatest migration in the history of the world. In the next 20 to 30 years, about a billion people will move from rural to urban. Greatest migration in our history. In China, in Asia, in India, in Africa. That's going to mean new cities being built that aren't even designed yet. It's going to mean an enormous shift of economic power. It means infrastructure spending that experts are now suggesting will exceed $40 trillion. And it's also going to mean a shift from the traditional urban powerhouses, particularly in Western Europe and frankly North America, to brand new cities. Remember a few months ago when India, the power grid crashed? Chaos on its highways and cities. 700 million people were affected. Infrastructure today is a global problem. No competitive city, no competitive country can operate today without modern, secure, reliable infrastructure. And that's a bigger and growing problem for us. This is going to drive a lot of public and private sector spending and policy in the decades ahead. And in Canada, we have to make sure that we don't slip behind, and frankly, we are. The McKinsey Global Institute is a well-respected think tank for its global analyses. And its conclusions are quite clear. There is a population and economic impact shift towards Asian and Southeast Asian cities. By 2025, it's not very long, not very far away. By 2025, 136 new cities are going to enter the top 600 cities in the world. Okay, you with me? Overwhelmingly, 100 of those 126 are going to be from China. So that means a dramatic shift in the traditional economic clout of many cities, as you can see from the chart here. Here's a new reality you're dealing with. A storied past is no guarantee of a prosperous future. In Canada right now, we're seeing the same kind of change. I find I'm increasingly doing work in Western Canada. I was in Regina last week, Fort McMurray yesterday. Because one of the changes that's going on in Canada right now is the substantial shift of economic and employment and, quite frankly, political power from the east to the west. The red and the pink are the hot economies in Canada right now. Ontario is kind of treading water. Quebec and the Maritime provinces are having some challenges. So in this era of monumental change in prosperity for cities and nations, the fundamental question that I am asking is this: how can we in Canada build smart, dynamic, 21st century cities that can compete successfully in this new global economy when we are handcuffed with a 17th century tax system and a 19th century governance model? To help me explore that question, I interviewed 7 leading Canadian mayors, former Prime Minister, a couple of premiers who were former mayors. I show you this list simply to point out that in taking back our cities, there is a diversity of views and experience and political leanings, but there is unanimity on the fundamental issues. We need to strengthen our cities and towns. We need to change the tax system. We need to deal with infrastructure issues because they are important to our national economy and our international competitiveness. Part of the problem, as you know better than anybody, we get 8 cents of that Canadian tax dollar. How can you build dynamic, prosperous cities on 8 cents? You can't do it. Now, at the heart of this is a question that Paul Martin raised with me. Do local politicians simply want more money from a senior order government? Hold out your hands and hope it rains down. Or do they want the power of new taxation to raise more money and be held accountable? It's a fascinating and fundamental question. And I can tell you right now, most local politicians can't answer it. Let me give you a quick, fascinating case study. 3 Canadian cities. A few years ago, you may recall that a couple of provinces, Quebec and Ontario, offered their largest cities some unique tax powers and authority. 3 cities, Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto, 3 different answers. Fascinating stuff. Mayor Tremblay in Montreal took the political hit, took the additional revenue, the new money. He's using it for urban transit and housing and so on. Quebec City said no. I'm sure they said no, merci, but they said no. Toronto initially took the revenue opportunity, has since reversed one tax, and is wavering on the other. So again, I say this is going to become the critical political question out there. And for a lot of council members, it will be a terribly frightening issue to have to deal with. Here's the reality. The traditional property tax system is broken, and it can't be fixed. It is a regressive tax. Nobody understands assessment. I have a line about MPAC, but I'll save that for another time. Property taxes don't tax productive economic values. They vary from city to city, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. They don't contribute to economic growth or prosperity. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi, bright guy, as you know, described our property tax system to me as regressive, feudal, and medieval. He went on to say, if you were designing the worst possible form of taxation, you may come up with something that looked like the property tax. Smart guy, Naheed. We had a great chat. Carl Zare told me, what we need is predictable, sustainable funding that does not rely on property taxes alone because it is a too regressive form of government. Smart mayors. Increasingly in Ontario, we are on our own. Municipalities are on our own. The Drummond Report, the latest Ontario budget, the federal budget, all combine to make it clear that, frankly, there will be little help coming to you in the next few years. The Premier told Good Roads in February that the previous commitment to permanent funding for roads and bridges would not proceed. There is little reason, in my view, and if you read the documents, I think it's pretty clear, to believe there will be another massive infrastructure program with federal and provincial partners in the next several years. Municipalities increasingly are on their own. And again, I ask you this simple question. Do you have the resources to fully develop your community? For most, the answer is no. So first, we've got to change the tax system. Second, people. Municipalities haven't done a great job in attracting the next generation of administrative leaders. It is not seen generally as a career that is appealing. I'm invited to speak at the Ivy School of Business from time to time. And for the last several years, I've asked these bright young HBAs, how many of you are thinking about municipal government as a career? And the answer I've received consistently is none of them. Frankly, with the political and the media scrutiny that comes thundering down on you from time to time, that's understandable. But municipalities really need to focus on their human capital and recruit more talented young people to serve. That also means the kind of community you are building is important to decisions that will be made by those people and their spouse and their family. It's an exciting opportunity, one we haven't been focused on as municipal leaders. Third part is the killer issue, infrastructure. I was speaking in Regina last week at the National Infrastructure Summit, and I have something of a different take than FCM, for example. About 2007, I think it was, they did the report with McGill. They identified the infrastructure deficit at $123 billion. And I think that was a useful baseline. I think it was interesting at the time to do it. But I think, and I said then, and I'm telling you today, that we are badly underreporting and underestimating the true municipal deficit and the problems that our towns and cities are facing. We need to expand our definition of this infrastructure deficit. So what I'm proposing is a 5-part definition, concept. We understand the physical, which is what this is, the roads, the bridges, the pipes. In Regina, by the way, the figure that was being tossed around is about $200 billion going into 2012-13, so that you can see the jump already there. Second, what I'm suggesting is we need to add technology. What city, what town, what village, what hamlet today can operate without electricity? None. You can't do it. Conference Board of Canada is saying our national infrastructure deficit for the electricity grid in this country is $300 billion. Then add on the technology, the high speed, how we get more into rural and northern communities and so on, so they are fully wired. It's a much bigger number. Now, a lot of that cost will be borne by subscribers, but they are also local taxpayers, and you know how enthusiastic they are when their rates on any utilities go up. Third is creative. If we don't offer in our communities the amenities and the lifestyle that people deserve, then we won't attract those bright minds and their entrepreneurs who will create jobs. That's why building libraries and parks and theaters and exciting public spaces and places are part of a dynamic, appealing community. Bright young minds increasingly, listen to this, they are increasingly making a decision not on what country they're going to move to, but what city they're going to live in. Borders don't mean much to them anymore. They can take their talents to Boston or Barcelona or Beijing. That's the global competition that we're dealing with now, is talent. There is a global hunt for talent on right now. Brazil, this is so smart. Brazil is investing $2 billion to send 100,000 of its smartest math, science, tech people around the world for a couple of years before they go back to Brazil. How smart is that? To get international experience. India now has 10 times more business schools than the US and Canada combined. Got to understand the global picture that we're dealing with. Brilliant stuff. Fourth is a new category that I've been watching for some years. And increasingly, municipalities are being asked to make major contributions to local hospital, college, university, even school campaigns. Sometimes it's to inveigle them downtown. And that's working out very well for the communities that have been able to do that. Kitchener, Burlington, Brantford, Cambridge, many other cities are contributing tens of millions of dollars to local institutions. The issue that you understand, of course, is that if that money is going to a university wing or a hospital building, there's less money for roads, bridges, water, sewer, libraries, and so on. Local council members have some very interesting decisions in the next few years. The final and the fifth part of my definition of the infrastructure deficit is what the feds and the province and the territories have to do. For example, the shared cost of public transit. Public transit deficit right now from CUTA is estimated at $53 billion in the next 5 years. Next 5 years. Trans-Canada Highway, if you've driven on the Trans-Canada Highway in several parts of this country, it is 2 lanes and in pretty rocky shape. The ferries on both coasts, dams. These are all things that directly impact local municipal prosperity. The time for municipalities having the little heads pointed, looking up, and this provincial and federal governments patting them gently, saying everything will be fine, is long gone. It's a different world out there. What I'm suggesting to you is that when you add up these definitions, the reality is we're approaching $1 trillion for our municipal infrastructure deficit. The bottom line is this: nobody knows the exact figure. Whether it's 600 billion, 800, whatever. The key point is we don't have the number, we don't have a plan, and we don't have the financing. As Mayor Nenshi said to me, I cannot imagine a world in which you can pay for capital using only the property tax. And he is right. We need a better system. As municipalities, we have not done a very good job of engaging the public in this debate. Opportunities to make it a federal and provincial election issue have been missed. Now, the Association of Manitoba Municipalities has been very proactive, and they conducted a poll last year that showed 2/3 of their residents approved of a proposal for a new 1-cent sales tax, with the proceeds going to community infrastructure needs. 9 in 10 agree communities need help. You know, the public's smart. They understand these things. You're not fooling them. They get it. So we shouldn't be scared of bold, innovative, imaginative changes to our tax structure. Now, this tax reformation that I talk about doesn't have to be that radical. Saskatchewan has just started giving its municipalities 1 cent of its PST. What a breakthrough. Yukon is just trying to negotiate a new deal with its provincial government, or territorial government. Progress is starting to happen. We're being left behind. Now, it's my contention that there are 3 big overriding critical objectives for municipal councils, and this comes after 13 years of being scarred here in London. First is supporting wealth generation in the local community. It is up to council to create jobs, but it is certainly up to them to have the climate for business to grow and good jobs to be created. The second, I would argue with you, is building and reshaping the local economy, the local community. And that means everything from modern infrastructure to robust downtowns, from people-oriented green spaces to efficient public transportation. In other words, the physical part of the community. And third, to deliver quality public services at an affordable price. And you can't do that without a strong local economy. But when I look at it from my point of view, everything else we do pretty much just supports those three. The problem is that local councils too often don't focus on these big, important jobs and issues and solutions, and they get diverted by unimportant issues. Quidnuncs. Isn't that a delicious word, quidnuncs? Quidnuncs are people who are focused on the small, the petty, the unimportant. I'm sure you don't have any on your council, but they're out there somewhere. If our councils want to play in prime time on the big stage, they've got to stop the foolish little issues that permeate too much council discussion. The reason is very simple. We've entered a new era, one that I have named the CRINK Economy. And that stands for creative and innovative and knowledge-based. That's where most of the jobs of today and most certainly of tomorrow are going to come from. The reality is 90% of business and employment, and this is consistent around the world, 90% comes from small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises. They produce 2/3 of the world's GDP. That's why municipalities are in this competitive battle that you face all the time, to attract and retain the smartest, talented, innovative minds of all ages. All ages. And that's also why the kind of community that you build, how you reshape that community to make it appealing, the condition of your infrastructure is so important to your future local prosperity. You need to develop your human capital, and all of those elements need to come together, and that's what a lot of councils aren't understanding. There's another critical challenge, particularly in Ontario right now. And it's an issue that is sharply differentiating cities across this country. In a number of communities, there are council members driven to a zero property tax increase. The problem is, as Diane Watts told me, a very smart lady, if you're at zero, you're going backwards. Now, my informal survey, and it is an informal survey, but I've been watching this for a while, is that many in Western Canadian cities, property tax rates are 2 to 5% a year increase. And they're using that money to invest in infrastructure and growth and economic opportunity. Conversely, many cities in Ontario are forcing a 0%, which inevitably will see service reductions, less economic opportunity, and infrastructure investment. And this is my greatest fear for you, is that you will be caught between the vice grip of short-term political demands and the prudent, stable financial viability of your community. I think more and more conflict is going to arise between councils and, frankly, you, between councils and their agencies, boards, and commissions, the ABCs. And you may well be sandwiched in a very uncomfortable middle position as they seek to strip reserve funds and engage in questionable budget and financial planning. The second fear I have for you is unfunded pension liabilities and how that's going to start jumping up more and more. Big issues for you. The question we are facing in communities across the country is, can you build creative, vibrant towns and cities on the existing property tax base and with the revenue opportunities that you have today? And for most, the answer is no. Too often, the result is short-term decisions instead of long-range planning, the inability to build new infrastructure, let alone repair the existing. At some point, listen to this, At some point, efforts to do more with less eventually lead to doing less with less. That's the reality. There's a question being whispered about by some municipal CAOs right now, wondering if municipalities in Ontario are going to be reduced to what I've termed the 5 Ps. We municipalities end up responsible for just planning parks, pavement, pipes, protective services. In Ontario, of course, with the 6th P, the provincial downloading, housing, and welfare. But my fear is that councils here have become so focused on the cutting and the chopping that they've forgotten they need to also build a vibrant community and to invest in the future for the people. Let me put this in a global context for you so you understand this. This is Songdo, South Korea. You've probably never heard of it. No reason you would. It didn't exist 10 years ago. It was built on reclaimed land off the coast near Incheon. It may be the world's greenest city, very high-tech, wired beyond belief. It's now an international business and finance center that is within 200 minutes by plane of 1/3 of the world's population. It also features a Jack Nicklaus Championship golf course, a central park, convention center, performing arts center. 300,000 people a day work there, 75,000 people live there. Oh yeah, it is a $40 billion project financed by private money. Welcome to a new competition in the global battle. The bar just got raised. And now you understand why those infrastructure issues are so crucial to our future prosperity. How are we doing in North America? Well, welcome to New York City. Welcome to Beijing. Welcome to passenger rail in Canada. Welcome to the maglev train in Shanghai that goes 431 kilometers an hour. And in Canada, we see our bridges crumbling, our sewers breaking, our annual spring pothole battle being lost, and our ability to provide clean food and water for local residents in some question. There are big environmental problems that we have to face that we are not. There's another important issue emerging that nobody is talking about. Insurance companies are beginning to get squirmy about infrastructure that is crumbling, that is badly built, that is endangering public safety. And when that happens, you know where your municipal insurance rates are going to go. I want to wrap up by outlining a number of things we can do, and I would offer this list as a starting point. The first thing is get the territories and the provinces to the table with cities to discuss who does what. My contention is simply this: tax dollars should go to the order of government that can deliver that service to the public in the most efficient, most sensible, most cost-effective basis. Got to get rid of those old silos. Now, I used to include the feds in here, and I have to tell you, I've changed my mind on that. We have a federal government right now with no urban agenda that is simply not focused on this in any way whatsoever. So I'm increasingly of the view that we're going to have to fight this out territory by territory, province by province. And only after that will the feds get involved and consider major changes in its relationship to municipalities. When you look around the world, Canada is one of the very few countries where substantial, really substantial portions of the revenue for municipalities come from property taxes and not from senior orders of government doing sharing of other tax dollars. Second, we've got to figure out this infrastructure funding, which is strangling our towns and cities, and it's increasingly starting to hurt our national economy. And all of the mayors that I interviewed, all the premiers and so on, agree with that. Bluntly, I have to tell you, I think municipalities have been passive for too long on this issue. The third critical element is to change the funding formula, the tax structure. The obvious way is to reduce the dependency on the property tax and get a piece of consumption taxes. Other ideas? Great. Let's get them on the table. But let's agree that we need to change how municipalities are financed. Ideas. Nothing more than this, ideas. In the U.S., cities in 34 states now have the authority to charge their own local sales tax. Now, here, there are at least three big problems with that. First of all, you need legislative authority. Good luck. 2, it's an extensive bureaucracy to administer. 3, for small rural communities, I think it's almost prohibitive for cost. It would be far, far easier, in my view, to add 1 cent to existing sales taxes and have all of that revenue flowing to municipalities. In Ontario, as you know, 1 cent of the HST is about $3 billion. Think about that on a per capita basis, what it would mean to your municipality. In London, for example, it would mean almost $100 million, brand new sustainable revenue. So figure it out from there. We need to get creative and smart and innovative. Let's get your ideas on the table. Let's get other ideas on the table. A new national infrastructure lottery. Why not? More public-private partnerships. I would think that's inevitable. Selling or leasing certain municipal assets, probably. I have mixed feelings about that, I have to tell you. Mandatory development charges. There are a lot of municipalities in Ontario that still don't charge development fees. So the cost of growth goes right on to the property tax base. Special surcharge on local taxes for infrastructure. Tax-free municipal bonds. Some cities are starting to edge into their own fundraising for community and neighborhood projects. It's a bit of a slippery slope in my view, but it's happening. What about that often talked about fraction of a penny on all the financial transactions in the world? Look, I'm not advocating for any of these. What I am saying is that the current system isn't working. It's not going to fix our growing problems at the municipal level. And we need to have the courage to look at new and different solutions. Say, you got great ideas? Perfect. Bring them forward. The overall issue, perhaps, is developing a national sense of urgency about this. We can't keep running from the realities. Municipalities can't solve this on our own, and certainly not on the local property tax base. Our 150th birthday as a nation is coming up in a few years. For those of us of a certain age, we remember 1967, when centennial projects flourished across the country. Maybe that should become our new national focus. When was the last time we did a great national project of some kind? You know, this is a great country. We've conquered difficult challenges before. But we're not going to win this battle if we don't have the courage to face the reality of the size and scope of the problem and develop a multi-layered plan to solve it. Our orders of government have been too divided, too separated, and too selfish for too long. That time is over. We need action. We need it now. And municipalities are going to have to be the ones driving it. And you will be in a leadership position, working with your political people to develop ideas and solutions and alternatives. This is an amazing country in which we're fortunate enough to live. We care about it. We care about the people who live in our towns and cities and rural areas. But we also need to understand that we are in a competitive global economy. We need to do that big thinking that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. That's why we need to take back our cities, so that we can compete on this world stage and ensure our prosperity for the next generation. And you finance officers, you treasurers, you people who run your towns and cities are going to be leaders in this battle in the years ahead. as our communities face these tough, tough challenges, you are going to be at the heart and the soul of these issues, and your solutions will provide the opportunity to move our towns and cities forward. So we are fortunate to have such smart and dedicated people as you in this battle. Thank you very much.